Okay, welcome everyone to another draft class recap video. Today we're doing the Indianapolis Colts. My name is Jim Harbaugh. Let's get started. All right, so as I've said, we've made it to the Colts. Almost felt like crapping out on this project because it's been a day since I uploaded. I tried to do an upload a day, but it didn't work out yesterday and it almost didn't work out today. I got really tired and took a 4-hour nap in the middle of the day. Weird. Okay, so Indianapolis Colts. Big time changes came for Indy last year when Andrew Luck abruptly retired, and I had pretty mad respect for his decision and why he decided to walk away from the game. But it left the Colts in a little bit of a pickle because this was a team prior to his retirement that we thought this team was built to win a Super Bowl and be a contender. I still think that is within the realm of possibility. The only problem is now the Kansas City Chiefs are the kings until proven otherwise, and a lot of other teams in the AFC are getting really good. The Ravens come to mind. The Steelers will have Roethlisberger back next year. The Bills are starting to build a really good, solid defense with a young offense. The things are in fluctuation. But the thing that the Colts do that I really like and appreciate about this franchise is they draft really well and they find value where you might not think otherwise. And this draft gave me a few surprises, and we'll go over all of them. But let's start with no first round pick this year. Instead, they have 2 in the second. So we got round 2, pick 34, Michael Pittman Jr., wide receiver from USC. I really like this pick. I think this is going to be a very solid pairing with T.Y. Hilton. Of course, they still have Paris Campbell on the roster, who I think is developing nicely. I think he'll have a good second year. And this is what you need to do when you bring in Phillip Rivers to take over for a year while you try to figure out the future. Give him weapons that he sort of had, try to mirror what he had in, almost said San Diego, try to mirror what he had in Los Angeles with the Chargers. So, Michael Pittman finished his career at USC with 171 receptions, 2,519 yards, and 19 touchdowns. He had a great senior season, big-time breakout, 101 receptions, 1,275 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns. He was the Pac-12's #1 leading wide receiver in receptions, receiving yards, and yards per reception. So he did all of the things very well. And he could have played himself into the first round. It's just that the wide receiver class was really good this year, so that just moved him to the second round. No real big knock on his skill whatsoever. All right, then a few picks later, round 2, pick 41, Jonathan Taylor, running back from Wisconsin. This one kind of surprised me because they have a pretty decent stable of running backs with Marlon Mack. I think Hines is still on the roster. And Marlon Mack is one of my favorite players in the league from a rather obscure standpoint, if you will. But the Jonathan Taylor pick really surprises me. So maybe it's just the direction they're going. Maybe they're gonna have him be like the #1 bell cow, and Marlon Mack regulated to sort of the James White role that you see in the Patriots offense. But Jonathan Taylor, very productive college running back, and probably one of the most productive college running backs that we've ever seen. If you remember the days of like Ricky Williams and Ron Dane, types of that. So he finished his career with 926 carries, 6,174 yards, 50 touchdowns, 2 2,000-yard seasons. He was the #1 rusher in the NCAA for 2018. In the Big Ten, he was #1 for 2019. And he was also the #1 leader in points scored for the entire NCAA, which is absurd when you think about it as a running back. Now, think about that, though. 926 carries. I knew going into this draft that he had a lot of wear and tear on those legs, but 926 in 3 years is a lot. And 6,174 yards is a lot. And you think about it, like, those aren't just... No yard in the NFL or the NCAA is a gimme. It's not easy. But that's 6,174 yards in the Big Ten. Probably the only conference still clinging to the life of what is a pro-style offense. So, yeah, it's impressive that he's managed to do what he's done. And the only concern that I would have personally would just be the experience. He's got a lot of years with a lot of carries. to where he had more than 300. And in today's NFL, you don't really want to see that. And I think the last big time NFL running back that we've seen decline after a 300 carry season was somebody like Michael Turner, if you remember him. But I'm excited to see how he fits in the offense. It could be very well. Moving on to round 3, pick 85, we have Julian Blackmun, safety from Utah. This is a great draft class for Utah. I mean, hats off to them and their recruiting that they did and their coaching. Blackmun finished with 118 tackles, 9 interceptions for his career at Utah. He was the Pac-12 leader in interceptions last season with a total of 4. Probably going to slide into the Malik Hooker position because apparently Malik Hooker's on the trade block, and as of this recording, I think he's still available and hasn't been traded yet. Moving on to round 4, pick 122, we finally get what everybody thought they were going to do in round 2, and that's a quarterback. And they take Jacob Eason, quarterback from Washington. Jake Fromm was still on the board at this point, so they decided to go that route between Eason over Fromm, which is interesting because Eason spent 2 years at Georgia and he couldn't beat out Jake Fromm for the starting job, so he transfers to Washington and he becomes a 1-year starter at that college. Finishes his career with 468 passing completions, listen to me, 5,590 yards and 39 touchdowns. He was the Pac-12's number 4 leader in passing yards for the 2019 season with 3,132. Cannon for an arm, absolute laser show. Why he couldn't beat out Jake Fromm at Georgia is anybody's guess, but from mostly I ask around to get opinions on that, and the one that keeps coming up the most is that he just wasn't fit for the system, which is interesting because normally you think if you have somebody who can be a downfield threat and hit home runs all the time, you would adjust to that. But Georgia liked what they had in Jake Fromm, and incumbency is a difficult thing to defeat when it comes to quarterbacks in any league. So very interested to see how that plays out. 4th round pick. Is he the quarterback of the future in Indianapolis? Hard to say. Hard to say because late round picks, unless you're somebody like Tom Brady, don't usually pan out too well. If you all remember the 1 year that everybody thought Jimmy Clausen could be a 1st round pick, he ends up sliding to, I think it was the 3rd, him and Colt McCoy. And Clausen just never was able to transition to the NFL level. So Jacob Eason, we're going to have to check back on this draft in a couple years. Moving on, round 5, pick 149, Danny Pinter, guard from Ball State. MAC represent. Then we go to the 6th round, and the Colts just decided to be greedy and just hog up a whole bunch of the draft time. Pick 193, Rob Windsor, defensive tackle from Penn State. 120 tackles and 13 sacks for his career. He'll be a useful run stuffer in the middle. Pick 211 in round 6, Isaiah Rogers, defensive back from Massachusetts, all-around athlete. Very, very, very diamond in the rough type pick with this one. I'm interested to see how his career plays out because at UMass he had finished with 187 tackles for his career, 11 interceptions, 34 passes defended, and he was a return specialist. He finished number 1 in the NCAA in kick return yards in 2019 with 1,295, but only 1 touchdown. But that 1 touchdown was good enough to be number 1 for FBS Independence in 2019. So it's a little bit of give and take there. So interested to see how they use him this year. Round 6, pick 212, Desmond Patton, wide receiver, Washington. That's an interesting thing. You bind a you bind a skill position player with the quarterback that you just drafted. I'm always interested to see that sort of experiment. And Pittman was a reliable pass catcher for Eason in Washington. Finished his career 156 receptions, 1,976 yards, 13 scores. He was the number 4 wide receiver in the Pac-12 last year in touchdown receptions with a total of 8. Moving on to the last pick of the day, which came right after that, pick 213, Jordan Glasgow, linebacker from Michigan. Finished with 139 tackles, 7 sacks. He finished top 10 in the Big Ten in tackles last year with 89, good for 7th overall. So a project linebacker, if you will, with not too much flashiness to be had. He's basically going to be probably an interior second line of defense, run stopping linebacker off the ball. All right, so this is a pretty good draft haul. I spent quite a decent amount of time with the first couple picks. I'd have to say that in a couple years we could be talking about this being one of the more undervalued, underrated drafts in the league, and I think the Colts always do draft pretty well. You know, Quentin Nelson kind of fell into their laps. Andrew Luck fell into their laps. But they do find value. I've liked. I thought their picks to retool the secondary in this defense over the last few years that has been basically glued together with spare parts prior to the drafts has been a phenomenal feat for them. And I think Michael Pittman Jr. is going to be an absolute monster with T.Y. Hilton on the other side. So this is a very good draft. I'm pretty happy with it. Not that I'm a Colts fan, but at the same time, I think if you're a Colts fan, you've got Phillip Rivers this year. You've got Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Taylor. You got Jacob Eason waiting in the wings. I think after what happened last season with the Andrew Luck retirement and how all the fans handled that, I think you are just going to try to forget that season even happened and move on to this, which is a draft that I think gives a lot of Colts fans some hope. So I look forward to the Colts this season, see how they do and compete. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Draft Class Recaps. I'll see you in the next one.